ओम सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामया सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् लोकाः समस्ताः सुखिनो भवन्तु ओम शांति शांति there is some kind of Kerala Samaj also involved.
Yeah, he is Kerala Hindu Society of members.
Are there any members here? Just oh, good. Prejudice. Anyway, so the topic that I'm supposed to deal with today sounds straightforward, but is a little deep affair, because the subject given is Vedanta for the modern world, deeper aspects of it. Okay. So first let's look into the word Vedanta and then the modern world and put two and two together. I think that's the way to go about it. The first Vedanta. We all heard about Vedanta. In fact, in Kerala, sometimes when we talk too much and advise people, they say, hey, don't talk so much Vedanta, let's do something. So, it's a popular word, it's a common word, but I don't know how many people realize the deep meaning of what it actually conveys. So let me start from the beginning with the word, analyze the word first. Veda, Anta. So we know what the Vedas are. Of course you know all the Vedas. You may not know all the Vedas, you know what the Vedas are. So we have the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda and Atharvana Veda. These are main divisions of the Veda. It was actually all mixed up. It was Veda Vyas. You know, the very word Vyasa in Sanskrit means compiler. It's called Veda Vyasa because he compiled the Vedas, split them into four parts: Rig, Yajur, Sama and Atharvana. Of course, not written down. For many years, Vedas were learned by rote. Nobody wrote down and read. Because they were learned by rote, they were known as Shruti, because you listen to them. You didn't read the Vedas, you listened. You can't write Shruti, you can only hear Shruti. Right? So, these are the Vedas. Now, somewhere along the line, there is a misunderstanding that when you say Veda, it's only the Samhita portions. No, for clarifying, when you say Veda, it means Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka and Upanishad. These are the four sections. Just the Samhita doesn't mean Veda. The Veda includes this whole thing from Samhita to Brahmana to Aranyaka and Upanishad. So, when you start with the Samhita portion, now even the Samhita portions of the Vedas have something which are known as the Mahavakyas, the great utterances. The Mahavakyas are interpreted by the Rishis. The essence of the Mahavakyas ultimately are interpreted in the Upanishads. Then the Upanishads therefore form the last part of this body of literature, which is the Vedas. And each Veda has its own set of Upanishads. So, since the Upanishads go to the depths of understanding of what the Mahavakyas mean, like Prajnanam Brahma, Tattvamasi and so on. I'm a little worried about saying Aham Brahmasmi and so on. In the wrong way, it might just build up your ego, that's all. So these Mahavakyas are explained and we made to understand what they really mean basically by the Upanishads. And these Upanishads form the last part of the Vedas, Vedic literature. Now, the last is called in Sanskrit Anta. So, when you say Vedanta, basically it means the teachings of the Upanishads. Veda Anta. It also has another meaning, which is that which when one studied, nothing more needs to be understood. Veda also means study. Anta means end. So, there is nothing more to be. It's done. Finished. So, therefore, also it's called Vedanta. Now, we will look into each carefully. Vedanta, when somebody goes to study Vedanta, traditionally, there is a curriculum. And the curriculum is called the Prasthanatraya. Prasthanatraya means 3 important parts of the curriculum. First, of course, are the Upanishads. Then you have the Brahma Sutras, which are so abstract. Can you imagine a text starting with Atato Brahma Jignasa? Let's study about the Brahman. I mean, so wait a minute now, what is this Brahman we are talking about? So it's very abstract. So, but it also forms part of the Prasthanatraya, the 3 curricula necessary. So one Upanishad, second the Brahma Sutra, and third, of course, is the Bhagavad Gita. So like I'm not going to go into that, but like I said yesterday, Bhagavad Gita simplifies Vedanta. Like it's difficult to get an understanding through like Brahma Sutra, for instance. Upanishad, yeah, to a great extent, but Gita kind of makes the teachings of Vedanta simple and practical and applicable to daily life. However, these 3 are the curriculum. So now we'll start one by one and go from the Upanishad side first. There are many Upanishads. Out of the many Upanishads, there are 11 major Upanishads. 11 major Upanishads because all the great acharyas have written commentaries on it. This is something great about the Hindu or the ancient system of thought which developed on the banks of the Sindhu river, and that is that there is nothing excluded. It is also inclusive. 2000 years ago, the Rig Veda said, Ekam Satvipra Bahuda Vedanti. There is only one truth, but the wise men may call it by different names. Not as if I have only one book, I won't look this way, that way. No. There are different, it's like a huge ocean into which different streams flowing. The thing is, when the streams flow in, they are lost in the ocean. You don't see them separately. So, while there are so many Upanishads, the 11 major Upanishads are those on which the important acharyas have commented. Why I am saying this is because there is the interpretation and commentaries, Karikas, by Adi Shankaracharya. I am not mentioning him first because he was from Kerala, but Adi Shankara, even the Gita and the Upanishads, perhaps the first commentaries that we hear of, we know of, are by Adi Shankara. Perhaps there were other commentaries because he sometimes says that it's not been properly interpreted by somebody and so on. Before that, of course, there was his Guru's Guru Gaudapadacharya, who also did a lot of work on the Upanishads, especially the Mandukya. And the fact is, if you take up one Upanishad, we might have to have 4 satsangs. I am trying to make it as short and as possible for us here. You can go home and start the study in detail. So why I said this is because when Shankara interprets the Upanishad or the Gita, he has his Advaitic interpretation. Because he believes Advaita Vedanta, which says Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, this world is an illusion and the Brahman alone is real. Now, we have to be very careful with this. While in the ultimate analysis it may be so, we have to be. Now, then came Ramanujacharya. You know, when Vedantic teachings of Advaita Vedanta became too cerebral and people kind of lost the heart and became too caught up in intellectual discussions and started saying the world is an illusion when you have to eat, drink and sleep and so on. Ramanujacharya, what happens is when these things change, then somebody appears on the scene. So came the great Ramanuja. He agreed that there is Advaita, there is only one reality. That when Nimbarka also says there is Shuddha Advaita, one reality but only Krishna. Advaita simply means one. So when Ramanujacharya came, he found that the devotional element was missing a little bit. So he introduced little more of bhakti. It's not that Shankara didn't know about bhakti. I think he was also a great bhakta, actually. After doing all the study of Vedanta, writing so many commentaries on the Upanishads and saying this, there's only one reality and then nothing else exists. Having said that, he was also the author of Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Mudamate, which means, oh fool, Muda is a fool. Fool, sing the name of Govinda. Samprapte sannihite kale, nahi nahi rakshati dukrana karane, which means your time is approaching when you are going to go. Samprapte sannihite kale, it's time. Grammatic constructions are not going to help you. Nahi nahi rakshati dukrana karane. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam, Bhaja, sing the name of Govinda. So it's not that Shankara, in fact, among the best tantric books that we have today is the Saundarya Lahari. And who is the author? Adi Shankara. But what happens is the followers who come after, they are the ones who twist and make things different. So Ramanuja found this was happening, so he came and introduced, which is also Advaita, that there is only one reality. He said, why don't we call that reality Narayana instead of Brahman? Srimad Narayan. And he said, this is Vishishta Advaita. Since we are on Vedanta, I am just trying to give you, because otherwise there is this big fight between we are, Ramanujites and Shankarais. It's a different ways of looking at things. So Ramanujacharya introduced what is known as Vishishta Advaita. In fact, all the priests you will find in all the Balaji temples, Tirupati temples, they are all belonging, Sri Vaishnavas belonging to the Ramanuja Sampradaya. They believe a lot in rituals. For them to think of God is to think of God as living. So in Tirupati, if you go, they put God to sleep. In the morning they put him in the what's that called? Swing. And everything is done as if there is somebody living. So Ramanuja introduced Vishishta Advaita because he said the heart connection is required. Just can't intellectualize. So he said, true that every human being is part of the divine. Okay, I agree with that. But his theory was that if there is something called Srimad Narayan, a figure, let's say. Now the body has many cells, right? All Jivatmas are the cells there. You can't say the cell is not important, but you cannot say that it is the supreme because it's a collection of cells there. But the supreme cell is here, handling everything, that is Narayana. While you are enjoying the benefits of that energy. He also said, while it's true that everything is made of one substance, which is the reality, the Brahman, he said water is water in the sea, water in the river, water in the pond. Even this glass which is filled with water is also water, nobody is denying that. But in this water you cannot run a ship. You can do it in the ocean. That is Narayana and this is Jiva. I mean, these are people who studied things and went deep into it and talked with experience. Anubhava is so important. Otherwise we are caught up in theories. After him, I'm talking about Vedanta, which is why I'm saying this. Unfortunately, people say Vedanta means there are some people who say it must be Advaita Vedanta. It can't be anything else. Not true. Even the Vaishnavas, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's people also have a Vedanta, Bhakti Vedanta. So, then came Madhvacharya. The Udupi temple, Krishna temple in Udupi, is run by the Mathas belonging to Madhva. Any painting of Madhva, nobody had pictures, of course, photographs. Any paintings of Madhva, you'll see him sitting like this. That means there are two, not one. Which means what? We said the Jiva is Jiva, the Brahman is Brahman. If the Jiva being finite has some qualities of the Supreme, but since the Jiva is finite, it cannot merge in the infinite. If the finite merges in the infinite, then the infinite becomes a conglomeration of finites. It is not possible. He said, when the Jiva becomes pure, when the mind becomes pure and the Jiva shines forth, it reflects the glory of the Supreme. That's about all I can talk about, Madhva said. He didn't say it's the same, he didn't say it can merge. He said when it is purified, then the reflection of the divine falls on it. This is the highest state one can attain. I say that we can start somewhere at least there. Let's not. So, these are the different approaches to Vedanta. And after that, so as I said, Vedanta is the last part of the Vedas, which are basically the Upanishads, the Gita. Now, why I'm saying this is very interesting. About 12 years ago, I was invited to Harvard, where there is a very big department of philosophy and religion. So there was quite a good audience, and the front rows usually were professors of religion, psychology, philosophy, some Indian philosophy. All are whites, not an Indian. So when I, in my talk, kept referring to Vedanta, Vedanta, one of them stood up and said, "Sir, when you say Vedanta, which Vedanta are you talking about? Advaita Vedanta or Vishishta Advaita or Dvaita of Madhva, which Vedanta are you talking about?" So then I could explain to him what I'm saying is, in an Indian audience, nobody has asked me this question. Why? Why are we not studying our own texts? Why don't we look at it? It takes somebody from there to ask you.